My name is Maria Clark, and I'm the Executive Director of NORTH, the Non-Resident Tax Help Group. And today I'm going to talk to you about a tax orientation for international students and scholars focused on tax year 2024. So we're going to do a quick introduction and then spend a lot of time talking about federal taxes, and then talk a little bit as well about the tax services and support we offer to students. So North is a nonprofit who helps individuals who were non-resident aliens, which is a federal tax residency status. Generally, these are people on FJ, MRQ visas, and we operate free tax clinics that help them do their taxes for free. We offer software, tools, guides, and assistance by IRS trained and certified volunteers. We partner with organizations that bring those visa holders here to the United States. And we make filing taxes professional, simple, and free for international students, scholars, teachers, and researchers. We're a nonprofit, and last year we helped quite a lot of people. So we helped just over 3,000 people file their returns, get almost $1.75 million in federal refunds back. We support a national coalition of organizations, including University of Minnesota campuses, Lehigh University, App State University, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Washington State, and 250 other organizations in 36 states and 18 countries. So we help a lot of people, and we're hoping to help you today or this year as well. So let's start talking about federal taxes. So the first thing that you should know is that federal taxes are done on a calendar year basis. So it is all income and expenses from January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2025. So you're not going to file a tax return for a specific job or a specific kind of income document. You're going to add everything together over that course of the year. As we think about the year, before the year starts or when you start receiving income, you and that school or that organization are going to do some paperwork. And then during the year, you're going to receive money. The school is going to be sending money to you. They'll send a little bit to the tax authorities. But then after the year ends, that's when you are kind of in charge again. You have to prepare your tax returns. Your school or organization will send some documents, and that's really where we can start helping you, is we'll help you file those tax returns, and then you'll send them off to the tax authorities. And then after the year is done, or after that is done, again, you'll be in charge. You'll be waiting to get some refunds back, maybe make a payment if you have to. If you run into any problems, you can talk to us. We also work with low-income tax clinics, which are free legal tax clinics that help people with tax issues. And then the tax authorities are pretty involved there, right? They're going to process your return, process the payment, or send you that refund back. So let's talk about what we mean when we say an income tax. So income means money coming into you. Some types of income are not taxed, but many of them are. And the way the US tax system works is the more money you earn or receive, the more tax you will pay. It starts at around 10% and goes up to 37%. And there are many, many special rules, exemptions, and adjustments. And a lot of those depend on your personal situation. So think of 100 years of social engineering through making rules about taxes to try to persuade people to do things. If you buy an item and you pay tax on it, that is called a sales tax. Those are generally charged automatically when you buy something. There's no refund for those. There's no tax return form. Just simply the act of buying them is how you pay that tax. And there's no way to get a refund on that tax unless you actually take that item back. All right, so one of the kind of fundamental tenets of the US tax system is that it is every person's individual responsibility to calculate and pay their own taxes. Remember, taxes are going to be based on a lot of personal information, and so your taxes are going to be unique. They're not going to be the same as anyone else's. Taxes are a pay-as-you-go system, so as you receive income, you're supposed to pay a little bit in tax. When you work for an organization, they help you out with this. They send that to the government. And if you owe too much at the end, they will charge you a little bit of interest and penalties because they needed that money during the year to pay their bills as well. So when an organization takes some of that money and they send it to the tax authorities, it's called withholding. And they generally will only do this when they're required by law to do it. And it's always going to be an estimate of how much tax you owe. Remember, it's going to be dependent on your individual circumstances to figure out exactly how much tax you're going to owe. So they're going to take some out, but it's not going to be the exact right amount. It's going to be an estimate. Sometimes you can give them some guidance about how much to take out, say, take a little bit more, or can you take a little bit less? Sometimes you can't change it. They're required by law to take a certain percentage out. However, the IRS or the tax authorities, they're always happy to have more money. So if you need to, you can always send in some money yourself, and that's called an estimated payment. So after the end of the calendar year, we know how much money you would have received, and you can prepare a tax return where you will complete it and compute your actual amount of tax liability. Then you file your tax return, which is when you mail it or electronically send it to the tax authorities to tell them what you have calculated. You may need to do this even if you owe no taxes or even if you don't get a refund. And then finally, one other really important thing to know is that each taxpayer is ultimately responsible for the information on their tax returns. Although we help you, you are the one that's responsible for sending it into the tax authorities and saying that it is correct. All right. So when you're going to file, you're going to need a tax ID number. And that type of a number will depend on your personal situation. If you're authorized to work here in the US, you're eligible for a Social Security number. That's usually for things like on-campus employment or OPT or CPT. If you get US income but you're not authorized to work, you'll need to get an ITIN number, an individual taxpayer identification number. This is very common for individuals that have scholarships or fellowships that cover living expenses, room and board, or a stipend. If you don't need to file a tax return, you cannot get a tax ID number. We get a lot of questions about people who want to get a credit card and need a tax ID number. Unfortunately, that is not a reason that the IRS will take. It's got to be to file an actual tax return. We can help people through this process. Generally, there is a requirement for an in-person meeting, but if you have a question, you can contact us and we can either help you in person or point you to some free resources to get help with an ITIN. All right, when you send your tax return in, especially after you e-file, you'll get a notice that the IRS said, yes, we accept it or we don't. Just because they said accepted doesn't really mean that they agree that it's correct, unfortunately. It just means that it passed the first round of checks. It makes sure that your name and your social security number match, that the math on your form works, and that none of the basic kind of rules about how things should be filled out are broken, and that your general W-2 information matches what was sent to the IRS. Then they will process that return. They'll do more checks on it. They might send you a letter if they want more information. They can send you their refund. They might send you a letter that says, we changed it based on the information that I have. But when you get that money back, that's really kind of when you can think that the IRS has agreed with your return. Now, they can change their mind if they want to review it again or they decide they want some additional information. They have up to 3 years to do this for any reason at all, and they can do it forever if they think that there is fraud, where you are deliberately filing an incorrect return to get a larger refund than you're entitled to. That's not common, but it could happen. And in general, what I would say is if you do get a letter from the IRS or any tax authority, number one, don't ignore it. Always open it, see what they say. And please feel free to reach out to us. We can help you kind of understand what they say because sometimes it's quite confusing and talk to you about what your options are to move forward with that. All right, so I mentioned 100 years of social engineering. Here's a little peek into that, right? There are a lot of things that can affect how much U.S. income tax you're going to owe. The biggest one is going to be your U.S. tax residency. There are a lot of treaty benefits that are available for F&J visitors, and so your tax residency and your visa can tell you which ones you might be eligible for. Your marital status will affect your return. Your income, just how much income you have, as well as the types of different income. There's also where that money comes from. Is it coming from here in the US or is it coming from outside of the US can affect it. Then how you spend your money can also affect your tax return. If you support someone like a child or a parent or other people you live with, loans for some purchases occasionally will get some special tax treatment. There can be special treatment for taxes that you pay to other government units or qualified education expenses under some circumstances. So lots of things can go into it. Those are the big ones. We'll talk a little bit more now about tax residency because that's going to affect all international students, scholars, and such. So, if you are a U.S. citizen, you are automatically a U.S. tax resident. The IRS term for someone that is not a citizen is an alien. And a resident alien is going to be taxed the same as a U.S. citizen. There are a few folks that still do enjoy treaty benefits, but generally, if you're a U.S. citizen or a resident alien, you are going to get to pay U.S. tax on your worldwide income. If you are a non-resident alien, you're going to use a special set of rules. There are limited deductions and credits, but you also only get taxed on your U.S. source income. So what happens outside the United States stays outside of the United States. All right, so a non-resident alien is someone that does not have a green card and has not passed what's called the substantial presence test. And this is a test that counts the number of days that you're here in the US. It's used every year, and some people are exempt from that test, and we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm not going to go through the math, but you can see it right there on the screen. It can get a little bit complicated. A resident alien is going to be somebody that does have a green card or an individual who has passed that substantial residence test. A non-resident alien or a dual status alien can also, if they are married to a resident, they can also choose to be treated as a resident for the whole year. And then just a reminder, right, this is residency for tax purposes only. This is not residency for immigration purposes. All right, so let's talk about those exempt individuals. So the residency test, if you don't have a green card, is called the substantial presence test. Most people, if they are here in the United States and not a citizen or a permanent resident, they will use that test. However, some people are exempt from the test, the residency test. And those are going to be students that are on F, J, M, or Q visas for the first 5 calendar years. They're here in the US on one of those visas. It'll also be a teacher or trainee on a J or Q non-student visa who was not previously exempt as a teacher or trainee for any part of 2 of the preceding 6 calendar years. So I know that's kind of a mouthful to say and a big one to wrap your head around, but we've got a tool here that's going to make it pretty easy when I get to that next slide. If you have a family member here on a -2 visa or a dependent visa, they are going to use the same rules that you do. And anyone that's an exempt individual is not going to count the days that they are here in the US on that exempt visa towards the substantial presence test. So almost always that's going to mean that in those years you're going to be a non-resident alien. However, you're exempt from the substantial presence test or the residency test. You're not exempt from paying taxes. So if you have income, you will still most likely need to pay taxes and pay income tax on it. All right, I mentioned an easy way to do this because there was a lot of math I threw at you, right? Count the number of days, 2 out of 6 years. A much easier way to do it is actually to use our residency tool. Basically, you can just enter your visa and travel history. It does need to be your full one to make sure we capture all of those years that may count towards that 5 years or 2 and 6 years. But it does all of the hard work for you to count all of your days and figure out if you are going to be a resident or not. It also gives you a clue down at the bottom as well. If you are an exempt individual, you have to file a special form that says, I'm here, I'm exempt. And it'll give you that little reminder that says, no, you are required to file. It's called Form 8843. Now, one thing to know, if you are a non-resident alien, that means you're not a resident of the US, so you are going to be a resident of a different country. And that's going to be really important because that's going to determine what country's treaty benefits you would use. And so when you look at that, you're going to look at where were you living before you came to the US. So not like just for a 2-week vacation or something like that, but like where was home before you came here? Usually it's going to have to be at least 6 months in a country. Often it's going to be, the country of your citizenship and where you've lived your entire life. But it doesn't have to be the country that you're a citizen of. You can be a resident of a different country. If you ever have any questions, you can just reach out to us on that at your member tax help email. We'll be happy to help you figure that one out. All right, there is a fancy thing called a dual status alien. This is an individual that's a resident for part of the year and a non-resident for part of the year. They have very special filing requirements. Usually it's when somebody enters during the year and passes the substantial presence test. Often this is going to be on like an H-1B visa or a different type of visa. It can also be an exempt individual that gets a permanent resident status or a green card during the year, or somebody that leaves the US after they pass the substantial presence test and they don't come back. Unfortunately, the IRS has determined that dual status aliens are out of scope for our program, so we can't help you if you are one of those. And in that case, you're going to probably want to see a tax professional because it does get a bit more complicated. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the effects of tax residency. Here's kind of a big table. I'm going to just hit some of the high points. First one, really important, gifts, right? If you're here as a student and your family is giving you money so that you can go to school, it doesn't matter if you're a US tax resident or not, you as the recipient are not going to have to pay any taxes on that. If you work at a job either on campus or off campus, you will have to pay tax. US tax residents are going to pay tax, and occasionally there can be some treaty benefits. Non-resident aliens also are going to pay tax, but they also much more frequently get treaty benefits as well. That can eliminate the tax on some or all of their wages. If you work outside of the US and you're a US tax resident, you still got to pay tax here in the US. But if you're a non-resident, you don't have to pay tax in the US on that. Investment income, such as dividends or capital gains, if you're a US resident, it's going to be taxed, often at a lower rate than wages. However, non-resident aliens, it can get pretty complicated. It may not be taxed. It may be taxed at 30%, which is a pretty high rate, or there might possibly be a treaty benefit to reduce taxes. So generally, most international students don't have a lot of investment income, and that's great because it does get very complicated and can get expensive if you have a lot of income there. Business income is all going to be generally very complicated. About the only thing I can say is if it's from outside the United States and you're a non-resident, then it's not going to be taxed and we don't have to worry about it. And then the final one are scholarships and fellowships. So if you are here as a student going to get your degree and you receive a scholarship or fellowship that pays for what are called qualified education expenses, so required tuition, required fees, books, things that you have to buy in order to enroll in the class and get your degree. That scholarship or fellowship is not going to be taxed. And it doesn't matter if you're a US tax resident or non-resident. As long as it's qualified, it's not going to be taxed. For US tax residents, everything else is going to be taxed. So if you get a scholarship that pays for your living expenses, as a US resident, you are going to pay tax on that part of your scholarship. For non-residents, they also have that same qualified, not going to pay tax thing, but they also might get treaty benefits, which means it doesn't matter what you spend the money on, you still don't have to pay tax on it. So that's a pretty cool benefit. Everyone else is going to pay tax on it. And then finally, remember I said that if you're a non-resident, we don't care about what happens outside the United States. So if your government or an organization in your home country gives you a scholarship, even if that money is used to pay for your living expenses or non-qualified expenses, that as well is not going to be taxable. All right, let's talk about a few other special rules for non-residents. So an individual that is exempt must file what's called a Form 8843, even if they have no income. This is one of the only forms that you don't have to have a Social Security or an ITIN number. No tax ID is required. If you are filing a full tax return, then you can send that form with your tax return, hopefully electronically. If you're filing it on its own, there is no way to electronically file it. You have to send it in, mail it into the IRS on paper. We do have a tool that will help you fill out that form. If you go through it, you can answer a few extra questions and we'll print out the responses for you. If you have income, you must file what's called a 1040 NR. It's the 1040 non-resident tax return forms. Generally, it's going to be filed by individuals that have income subject to tax here in the US. If you had wages, it's going to be due by April 15th, and it can be e-filed in almost all situations. If you do have to paper file, things are going to get sent to a special address, either down in Texas or out in Charlotte, North Carolina. And when you file, or if you use our software or our tools, and you do need to paper file, we'll give you the instructions about what address you need to send it into. All right, so let's do a quick overview of non-resident aliens. So I talked about this a little bit, but we're gonna just hit some of the high points again. So a reminder, only US income is going to be taxable for non-residents. However, if you have any amount of income, you do have to file a tax return. Residents have a certain threshold where they don't have to file, but that's not the case for non-residents. If you have even $1, then you need to file. If you are a married individual, you cannot file a joint return with your spouse as a non-resident alien. You must use the married filing separate status. But remember, married means married. It doesn't matter where your spouse is. If they're back in your home country, that's fine, that's great, but you are still married to them and you need to use the married filing separate status. Wages are going to be taxed. Treaties may exempt a certain amount. If you're here as a teacher or researcher, generally you get a couple years where you don't have to pay any tax. That's awesome. If you're a student, then generally you're going to get a smaller set amount that you don't have to pay any taxes on. Now, your wages may or may not be reported on a 1042-S. That's a form that reports income that's subject to special withholding. It could also be just reported on a W-2. The form that you receive that reports your income does not determine whether you are eligible for a treaty or not. It's really about your tax residency status, what country you're a resident of, and the type of income that you are receiving. Scholarships are going to be tax-free for everyone, again, if they're for tuition, required books and fees. If you have a treaty, you may be exempt from paying tax on any other scholarships based on your country and visa. And for everyone else, they are going to pay tax on those. If you are self-employed, if you have your own business, and sometimes internships can end up with a 1099 like this, a 1099 NEC or miscellaneous, that's considered to be operating your own business, providing services or whatever. Unfortunately, that is also another area where the IRS has determined it is out of scope for non-resident returns for us to help with. We've got some guides that we can give you about how to enter some information, but we can't really assist you beyond that. If you have investment income, so dividends and capital gains, generally that's going to be taxed at 30%, so it's quite a high tax rate. There can be some treaties, but they are not very common, and it does get reported on a special form on the return. It doesn't get reported in the standard spot where a traditional resident would report their capital gains. One little fun thing, bank interest for non-resident aliens is not taxable and not reportable. So if you have a bank account and are earning some interest, then you don't have to pay any tax on that. Then cryptocurrency or digital asset sales or exchanges are also capital gains, and those are out of scope for all IRS VITA clinics as well. So unfortunately, we can't help with those too. All right, I said at the beginning, right, you get your income, what you receive, that may determine how much tax you owe. And then if you spend money on some things, that can also affect your taxes. And so when you prepare your taxes, you will be able to deduct or reduce your income by certain amounts. If you are a student from India, you can use the standard deduction, which reduces your income by a set amount. If you are not a student, and it's only the students from India, if you're not one of those, you will have to itemize your deductions, which means you take the money that you spent on certain things and you can subtract it from your taxes. Unfortunately, non-residents only get a limited number of itemized deductions, and so the taxes paid to a state or local government is the primary one that most non-residents have. If you made a charitable contribution, you may also get a deduction. If you are paying interest on a student loan, you may also be able to subtract that as well. Beyond that, for non-residents, there are essentially no credits. They're very rare, and there are absolutely no education credits. So if you get a Form 1098-T, which is what the schools send to their students to claim education credits, as a non-resident, unfortunately, you're going to just have to put that one into the shredder because it's not going to do you any good on your tax return. All right, let's talk about one more topic, which is Social Security and Medicare taxes. So non-residents on F1 and J1 visas do not have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. If you become a resident alien on that F1 or J1 visa, then you will start to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. And then non-residents who are here on a -2 visa, that dependent visa, even if they're a non-resident or a resident, they will always pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. Now, usually schools are really good about understanding tax residency and visas, and so they won't take out Social Security and Medicare taxes if you work on campus. However, if you go work off campus, not all of those organizations are quite as good at that. And so they may take out and charge Social Security and Medicare taxes on your wages. We can help you get a refund of those if you have that happen to you. The steps are basically to ask your employer for a refund. And then if they won't do that, we'll help you file forms 843 and 8316. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. And so this is one of our individual schools helps emails, but you can look at your individual school help emails or just the general tax help at nrtaxhelp.org if you want to send us an email for help with that. Two other things to know. Number one, this is entirely separate from your income tax return. So it's not going to be due by 4/15. It can be done whenever. So go ahead, file your regular income tax return, and then we can come back to that later. And the reason why we say that is the second piece, which is that our volunteers help through April 15th, but most of our volunteers are also students. So by the end of April, early May, they are focused on getting through their projects and finals. And so we take a pause after the end of the filing season and we come back to help with FICA refunds in the early summer. So if we're going to help you with it, we'd be delighted to do that. Let us know that you need help, but we probably won't be starting on that until mid-May. All right, so that's the general introduction to federal taxes. I'm not going to do an individual state tax presentation here. We will have separate presentations for each of the individual states that we support available on the Learn page. So if you are in a state that needs income tax help, you can look at that for some guidance and information. Otherwise, we unfortunately don't support all states. So if we don't have any information there, that means we don't really have the guidance for you. And you should go to that particular state's Department of Revenue website and look there for some knowledgeable information. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the services that we provide. So I'm going to talk about the North International Tax Clinic. We partner with a bunch of schools, so if it's your school is one of those, it'll be North and your school, whichever school that is, International Tax Clinic. All right, so I'm going to throw some letters at you. We are an IRS FIDA FSA tax clinic. And what that means is FIDA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. So this is a program in the IRS that basically provides free tax preparation for low to moderate income individuals with, I would say, relatively simple income tax returns. And then FSA stands for Facilitated Self-Assistance, which is basically DIY plus help, right? So we're not going to do everything for you. You're going to be doing a lot of the work, but we're here to help you through that entire process. We provide free tax help for individuals that are in scope. And our first scope criteria is somebody that has a school, nonprofit, or government email address. So those usually end in like a .edu or .org or .gov, but that is not a requirement. But those are the types of organizations that will generally bring FJMQ visa holders to the United States. We help everybody independent of their federal tax residency status. So resident, non-resident, that doesn't matter. The only one we have to throw in the caveat for is those dual status aliens, which we can't help. We'll help you if your income is under $84,000. This is a hard-coded limit in the software. So if your total income for the calendar year is more than $84,000, unfortunately, we cannot help you with that. And then again, some types of income are out of scope, like I mentioned, cryptocurrency or self-employment income. Now, sometimes, like the hard limit for the income, we can't really change. But a few other things, like the crypto, the software will prepare your return. So if you know how to do it, or if you go out to the IRS website and you read just a little bit to figure it out, the software will still prepare your return for you. It just means that we can't look at that and say, yep, that part is right. We can say, oh, yep, your wages are right, your tax residency is right, but that piece we can't comment on because that is out of scope for us. All right, so what do we provide? We provide 24/7 access to free software. It will prepare federal and all state returns. So even though we may not have the knowledge to support all states, the software itself will do all of them. And it can e-file both your federal and your state returns. And it can do multiple states. So if you work in multiple states, that is not a problem as well. We have several tools to help you. We have our residency tool, which we already showed you a little piece of that. We also have a treaty benefits tool to see what your treaty benefits are. And then finally, we have a guide. It's a personalized guide. Basically, it's kind of an interview. You enter your visa history, your tax residency, and your income documents, and it will give you a step-by-step PDF, kind of with screenshots to like walk you through using the software to prepare your tax return. If you don't have any income and you only need to file that 8843, we'll help you fill out that form as well. And then we've got some video demos of that also. We also provide individual support. So we have IRS trained and certified volunteers that will help you with your questions or with your return. If we have that agreement with your school, we will provide tax clinic-based appointments. Those can be either in person or remote. We also offer office hours for all of our members. They're remote 20-minute appointments. We limit you to one a day, but you can have multiple days. And then finally, we do email support, and we answer a lot of questions through email. It's a really good way to do it. Occasionally, we might refer you back to your personalized guide or say, hey, you missed this section. Please go back and follow those steps. We also can do a lot of work to diagnose any kind of reject issues if you electronically file and have problems. The one thing we can't really do over email, though, is a review of a completed return. We really need to have a conversation with you, look at your forms, look at your income documents, and talk to you about what you've done and what your situation is. So an office hour is like perfect for those if you want to schedule one. All right, so like how does the process work? So the first thing, if you're seeing this, hopefully you've already done it, right? You've requested your free membership. Select your school on that list if you have one. If you don't, the North membership is great. Make sure you use your school, nonprofit, or government email address. We automatically approve everybody, but if you use a Hotmail or Gmail or something else, we will come back and we will kick you off. So please save us the trouble. Just use your approved email to start with. And then when you join, you get access to several pages on our website. We have a learn page. If this is your first time, and this is where presentation is gonna live. It's a good way to kind of get some information about taxes in general and your situation. The Get Ready page talks about all of the different types of income documents and has a more expanded list of kind of what is in and is out of scope for us. On the Do Your Taxes page, that has the personalized guide link so that you can do that. It also has the link for the tax software. Let me tell you, for the first time, you'll see it lots around our website. Make sure when you create your account in the tax software that you use that link on our website, because that's what gives you the kind of the free token on your account so that the return is free. If you go straight to the TaxSlayer website to create your account, it will not be free. We can like help you reset it, but you're gonna have to like delete that account and then restart over with a new account using the link on our website. But the link is out there. It's on the Do Your Taxes page. And then if you need to, there's a Get Help tab. You can get assistance through our email, office hours. That's where the calendar is to book appointments, and you can go from there. All right, so the next step would be a demo of the personalized guide and actually using the software. I'm not going to do that here, but we do have that over on our Do Your Taxes page. So on that page, you'll have the personalized guide and the software link, and then below that, there is a demo. So if this is you kind of getting started, I would say grab all of your income documents and then go over there to watch that demo and see kind of what that process should be like. And with that, thank you for joining me today, and I hope that we'll be able to help you do your taxes for free this year.